Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World episode 171. I'm your host, John Jordan. Don't forget to check out my daily email about blockchain gaming. You can find that at gamestx.substack.com. In today's episode, I'm talking to Canaan Linder. He is the CEO at Stardust. So Stardust is one of the sort of tools and services companies that are helping blockchain game developers make games and scale games. They have two sort of main products. One is about building games and one is a UA product about scaling. We also spend a bit of time talking about how Stardust is differentiating itself from other similar companies like Sequence and Helica, both of whom I've had on the podcast fairly recently. And one of the things they're looking at is getting, or one of the things they are actually doing, is getting money transmission licenses, very important in the US. And we talk about why Canaan thinks that is an important thing for them. We also talk more generally about how he got into the industry. So that was very much like many of us, I suppose, back in the days of CryptoKitties. And we talk a bit about Loom Network for people who remember that as well. And also I sort of push him a little bit on his vision, which is the vision of many people in the sector, that there will be 1 billion people playing blockchain games at some point in the near future. And we talk a bit about the infrastructure around that, and just generally why that vision is an important one, and why Canaan thinks it is a question of when and not if. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Don't forget, we're putting out new episodes every week, so please subscribe, and see you next time. Hello everyone, welcome to the show. Very pleased I have Canaan, who is the CEO of Stardust. How's it going?
Good, thank you for having me. Great to meet everybody.
Good. So, first question, I think it's always good to find out a bit about the person who's going to be talking in the show. So, do you want to give us a bit of a potted history about your career
Sure.
up to this point?
Love to. So I'm based and grew up in Palo Alto, California. And before Stardust, I was a software engineer in New York City at Bloomberg. Really enjoyed it, but as everybody in crypto did, came across CryptoKitties in 2017. And I said, these are incredible. Digital collectibles, true ownership, we need these in games. And as an engineer, I tried to build a little game with them within it and realized there's a really difficult experience. Fast forward to today, actually to the day, 6 years later, we're now have been around for 6 years, we help some of the largest games in web3 scale to millions of players in the web3 space. Shrapnel, Midnight Society, some very web2 properties like Habbo Hotel, really making them successful in Web3, and that's our mission, to make sure every game developer who leverages this new technology has everything they need to make them successful in this new era of gaming.
Cool. Good. Well, that was a very potted history. You went 6 years in 2 sentences.
6 years, yeah.
So maybe let's unpick a bit of this. So we kind of come at it from the same timeline. So I was not quite in November, whenever it was 2017 when they came out, but CryptoKitties, I guess, as it was with a lot of people, was our first sort of introduction to NFTs. It was sort of the first thing, I think, to use the ERC 721 standard.
Totally.
So when you were looking at those, what was it? Because as you say, they're very sort of basic. I mean, the artwork, you can either like it or not like it. It was what it was, but it's really interesting that was so much the sort of point that a lot of people sort of crystallise around and could imagine, I guess, to some degree, where some of the stuff we've seen since. For you, what was it that sort of like sparked this enthusiasm?
So it's actually interesting because it's actually why we're named Stardust. So I was a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh player in high school. Not as much anymore. The game's changed a little bit, but my favorite card was actually the Stardust Dragon. And I was a collectible card enthusiast and collector for quite a few years, and still am to this day. And I understood the background of physical ownership, but it kind of opened my eyes to the concept of digital ownership, which is not something, I don't wake up in the middle of the night saying, oh my God, I don't own my digital collectibles in Fortnite. But this concept of having a digital ownership of this silly cat that I could take around the internet, that was connected to me, that eventually I could actually verifiably post that I owned on Twitter, right? Just this increased function. The fact that Vitalik one day could cryptographically sign my CryptoKitty, these were the things that I was like, oh my gosh, right? Like, I can get Ninja to sign my Fortnite skin. That is so cool. And I looked at my favorite card, Stardust, and so Stardust Cards Corporation, actually, is our full name. was actually built around this concept of true ownership, and came from my love of collectible cards and collecting them. And I wanted to give everybody else this ability to as well through the games they were playing on blockchain.
Okay, that's cool. Good. And you know, you say you're a sort of software engineer. You're sort of, you know, had this sort of nerdy card collection sort of thing. You get the, you know about blockchain. CryptoKitties comes along. And you're just like, yep, I see all this. And then was it? I mean, because Stardust. I mean, we'll get into that. I guess sort of now. Stardust isn't making games. It's helping game developers and providing tools and all this other stuff. So, did you ever go through a phase? You sort of mentioned you sort of tried to build a game with CryptoKitties. So, was sort of making games something that went beyond that sort of little experiment, or was that you always wanted to do more of the tooling? Always
more of the tooling. Look, we always love to dog food our own creations, but I'm very attuned to where our core competencies are. And there are great game developers who've been making some of the greatest games. And for context, I love the game just the gaming space. It's so different. When you go to, and I'm here in Silicon Valley, when you go and you talk to a lot of these people who work at Facebook, they haven't used Facebook in 15 years. You speak to game developers, they are creating the products they know and love. I love building, seeing games, but I'm not the best creator. But we can give the tools to the biggest and best creators to build the best games they can build. And so that's what we've been on a mission to do since 6 years ago. Yeah.
And I guess when you sort of started out, I guess the level of sophistication of those tools was not all that great. There was sort of really, everyone was doing stuff, I guess, on Ethereum mainnet. That was where CryptoKitties sat when we started to have a bit of sort of what we would probably now call L2 sort of coming around, and we had Polygon and a few other sort of L1 chains. But it's quite interesting that you decided you were going to set up Stardust doing tooling for games when there wasn't really a great blockchain game sector, and there wasn't really, everyone was sort of building the stuff themselves, so it wasn't really clear there was a market for what we might call tools or middleware. So how did you sort of stick to that as what you're going to set up a company doing, and when it wasn't really, it was so nascent, it was sort of hard. It'd be hard for someone like me to realise there was something there, business there.
It's a great question, and I will say tenacity, drive, and a fine dose of stupidity, I'll be honest, right, has kept us going on this singular mission for so long. And when so many people across these 6 years in different times of the market have said, why don't you go left? And we say, no, we're going straight ahead. It's what we've always been doing, right? That thick skin is a skill in and of itself, and could be the best thing you've ever done, or it could be the silliest, but only time will tell. And when we started, there was actually a gaming chain within the Cosmos ecosystem called the Loom SDK.
Yes.
It had a lot of the early guys on it. Axie Infinity had just done their mint. The Sandbox, Somnium Space, Neon District. OpenSea had just started, and actually we have the same seed funders as OpenSea and Blockchain Capital. Alex and Devin were in New York City as well with myself. And so it's been a long time coming that a lot of these teams get the recognition they deserve for having built for so long in the space. And even as we were all building on the Loom SDK went out of business in early 2018. It's not a great feeling when the chain you're building on packs up one day and goes out of business. But for the context around that, it's really been just our drive, our focus, our tenacity, belief that this industry will become the largest portion of gaming. In our, a zealot belief of that, right, has gotten us to where we are today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember the whole Loom. It's kind of funny because everyone was using Loom. I'm sure there were other sort of chains around, but that seemed to be where sort of the action was. And certainly, remember doing some stuff with Axie Infinity back in the day, and I think you could remember staking whatever it would have been, I don't know, I can't remember.
Good times. And actually, for a backstory on that that's fascinating, so when the Loom SDK had a business, actually Sandeep in Polygon had just started. Sandeep, Sanket, the rest, and they were at every conference. I mean, they talked to me so many times. They're great early BD guys. And they said, we're building Polygon. I won't say if they said it was an L2 or a side chain or whatever, that's it. Yeah. But back then, those words really didn't exist. And they said, look, just drag and drop your contracts from the Loom SDK. Pretty much everyone did, right? Somnium Space, Neon District, Sandbox, they all went. Axie Infinity was the only one who'd done a mint on the Loom SDK. And so that's the reason kind of Ronin exists today, if you will, is it wasn't as easy as a drag and drop for them because their players had true ownership already on a chain that was running.
Yeah. No, there's a good origin story about. And I don't. Well, it'd be interesting to the alternative history is if Loom had gone for a bit longer, whether Axie would have actually, or Scummo's would actually bother to do their whole sort of chain, but their own Ronin chain. But it was an interesting time, I suppose, because roughly about that sort of same time in my memory, Dapper Labs, who'd obviously done CryptoKitties, decided they were going to do what became Flow. So there was already like that sort of trend of they were L1s really. I suppose people like wanting to own their own sort of block space, and that became something just accelerated really as time's gone on.
Yeah, so, even IMX was around then. There was called Feel Games, right? Robbie and James had started with, they obviously had Gods Unchained. They also had Etherbots back then. And if Loom had stuck around for another 12 months, I think big things would have happened for them. And they would have been probably the dominant gaming ecosystem we see today. But, it's like the first ATMs. First ATMs came out, people said, what the hell is this, right? Second ATMs came out, and they said, this is God's given earth to people. So, it's not always the first iteration that works.
Yeah. And I guess coming back to the sort of Stardust story, when we started to see these multiples of sort of chains, I think the sort of first time I came across sort of you and sort of similar providers, sort of having sort of cross-platform chains or allowing people to sort of build their product without making decisions about what chain to go on, because it's always been very fluid, and we're in another fluid position where people are moving chains all the time now mainly from L1 to L2 to L3s or whatever we're going, but it still is that sort of crazy thing where where you're going to deploy is actually quite a critical decision. It's not that you can't undo it, but it's just a problem if you don't really want to have to undo it. And so I guess that became one of the first things where tools that help me not to make that decision too 100%. Early become very valuable.
And this is something we actually see where game developers and people, new entrants in the industry, have different thoughts whether you're in a bull market or whether you're in a bear market. So for context, gaming is a very, for again maybe want of a better term, copy pasta industry. What works, and then they stamp it out 15 times over, right? You got your Flappy Bird tappers, right? You got your, left-right swipers with like Fruit Ninja, right? All the way to this day, right? There are these concepts of human behavior that games take advantage of, not in a bad way, but to give experiences and enjoyment over and over and over. And in the space of blockchain, when it's a bull market, everybody wants to take what's working, Axie Infinity, Pixels, whatever it is, and they come and they say, give me this as fast as possible. Don't care what chain it's on, don't care why it's on. I want this game, I want the players. And in a bull market that works well because everybody is doing well, there are big successful games, Sandbox, whatever it is, everybody wants to copy those. Now, if you go into a bear market, that's when a little bit more of the experimentation happens. And where you see a couple, most game developers starting to say, I want this chain, I want that chain. This chain is better for my technology, this chain has a better community, right? It kind of flip-flops between, I just need a game ASAP that looks like this one, and I want to actually take time and effort and make a lot of custom choices for myself about where I want to build. And it's a cyclical cycle. The same thing with expansion into L2s, L3s, and then the contractions back into L1s that we saw with kind of the Loom SDK days. And that's really informed our product in a couple key specific ways, keeping it extremely modular so that game developers in times of expansion and need something fast can put all those Lego blocks together really quickly and say, boom, I got something. Versus when it's a little bit more of a builder's market, right, through the bear, they really have the ability to fit into their stack what works best for them.
Mm-hmm. Should we talk a bit more about exactly what Stardust is? Get off the memory, going down memory lane. I'm sure it was very interesting for everyone else, but he wasn't
Easy
there.
To do,
But yeah. So can you sort of take us through? You talk about the modular structure. What sort of key components are you offering to developers? What sort of things are they sort of interested in?
Of course. So we have two core products. We have really our infrastructure product, which is really surrounding wallets as a service. So that helps game developers to create millions of wallets for their game. And that's everybody we work with, from the biggest Web3 games, Shrapnel, Loop, Midnight Society, all the way to very Web2 publishers such as Tilting Point and Stillfront, who support 15 million monthly active users between them. That really allows game developers to scale with the technology they need. Through building that, we realized that scaling in gaming is not easy. Whether it's Web3, Web2, user acquisition is really difficult. And so from the other component of a product we have is Stardust UA. And that's actually a programmatic DSP that allows game developers to bring millions of players to their game. And that's really a very Web2 product, but applied with Web3 technology and Web3 data. Right? And so we know a lot more about who the correct players are to bring to your game, especially in Web3, because there is so much blockchain data we can use to really understand who the best players are in your game and how to bring the best ones into your ecosystem. And so between infrastructure and UA, really supporting those game developers in their success, with the ability on the infra side to support millions, with the ability on the UA side to acquire millions.
Cool, good. And this is a term that's used sort of quite a lot, and I'm also a bit nervous about terms that I don't sort of fully understand. So, without getting into all the weeds, because I'm sure you could do for a long period of time, wallets as a service is something that we sort of trips off the tongue now. Oh, we do wallets as a service, and it's sort of like, well, what is that sort of? What's the as a service bit? Because you sort of know we talk about games as a service, and we know that means the game sort of comes out, and then it's sort of going to be updated all the way along, and there's been new content and season passes, all this sort of stuff. You know, a wallet to some degree could go. No, I've opened my MetaMask. Got my stuff in my wallet. What's the service? You know, so obviously, unpick that one for us. What are you doing when you say wallets as a service? What's the service bit? What does it mean? Why should developers care?
Totally, and I'll talk a little bit more similar to Stripe. I'll use that as an example, right? When you open your phone and you have a DoorDash account, you don't set up a bank account. But at the back end of that, right, you have a whole economic system that DoorDash has not built themselves. They're leveraging Stripe for. The way to send payments from yourself to the restaurant, the way for the restaurant to hold money, for them to get it into their bank account. All of the liability is all in the back end, and that plumbing is done by Stripe so that DoorDash can be focused on creating a large consumer app, right? That's true about Shopify, that's true about Uber, right? They're all using that plumbing that Stripe has created. And on the wallet side, there's security, there's legal and regulatory risk. There are all these things that game developers don't want to focus on. They just want to build great games. And when my grandmother plays Candy Crush, she opens her phone and she plays, and then she, is done with the phone. And she does not set up a MetaMask. She doesn't know what that is, right? And very similar to DoorDash, right? She's not going to set up a bank account to use DoorDash, but she still orders food through it. And so with wallets as a service, it's that same type of service, so that when someone opens a game and they have no idea what blockchain is, behind the scenes, they can have that blockchain wallet set up for them in a secure and compliant manner and play the game as it was intended to be played without worrying what's on the back end, right? Okay. To order food from DoorDash and get it at your door without worrying what's on the back end. And so for games, that's exactly what we do. We allow players to have that incredible in-game experience. We allow game developers to have that incredible experience of building games without worrying about that back-end infrastructure they don't need to. And that's where Stardust fits in to really complement the whole gaming industry and the next billion players in Web3.
And when it comes to those sort of legal, financial sort of components, obviously further down the line, how much of that do you sort of build yourself, and how much are you sort of plugging in other sort of people? Because there's people, I suppose, there's on ramps and all this sort of other stuff. Blockchain, I guess, is a bit more complicated. Maybe it's not than banking. I don't know very much about banking, I suppose, but because obviously you don't want to spend. You don't want to have a massive legal department dealing with all this sort of stuff, or some of it you want to hand off, I suppose, as well, being crypto.
Sure.
So how do you find the sort of the how thick is that layer that you want to sort of control, and how thin do you want it to be efficient?
It's a great question, and there are two verticals of licensing, especially in the U.S. and even worldwide, that are extremely important. So in the U.S. we have businesses that can register as a money services business. Yeah. And that just means they deal with money and other people's money. And then we have money transmitters. And money transmitters means that you are regulated to hold and transmit money on others' behalves. So if you look at Coinbase, if you look at Stripe, if you look at any bank, they have this huge framework of money transmitter licenses and being a money services business. And these are not easy to get. And we're on our path, and we've acquired well over half of the needed prerequisites to get money transmitter licenses in all 50 states. I believe we're at about 27 today, and we're tracking very well to be at 50 sooner rather than later. We've been doing this for 2.5 years, and this is the backing you need as a wallet provider in the space. And actually, recently, the FBI has shut down multiple wallet providers saying these guys are money transmitters, and you cannot store your money here because they are money transmitters. And you see different service providers trying to get around that through things like key delegation and MPC, and it doesn't work. At the end of the day, you need the regulatory backing to hold money and transmit it on behalf of others, not only for the SEC, but for FinCEN and the FTC as well, because the Federal Trade Commission really does care. And you're seeing this also start to proliferate globally. You have VASP in Korea, you have MiCA, right, a set of laws that have just been passed in the EU. Look, a lot of people just say, we do key delegation and we don't have to worry about this. All the way up to some of the largest providers in the world that are holding cryptocurrency on behalf of institutions. We say, absolutely no way. We need to be ahead of the curve here. Even if it's not required, we need it because game developer success is our success. And without having the right regulatory framework for them, we cannot be diligent in our job.
Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty interesting. I didn't expect that because it's also that funny thing in the States where, obviously, United States have all the different laws, and you have to get money transmitted for every single state. Just like, and I can imagine there's probably some states. Well, I think New York would be one of the harder ones. So it's probably a very very annoying situation where you got 49 of them, and just that last one where you can say we could do the whole country.
Yeah, 48. California and New York are definitely two of the harder ones. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also interesting that you, as a from an outsider looking in, you're a tech provider, and certainly when it comes to non-blockchain games companies, I don't think many game companies, unless they're doing payment systems, are thinking about this sort of stuff at all. So that's a sort of
100%, 100%. And I will clarify that we're not trying to build everything internally.
No.
Right? We are going to use element providers and partner with the Stripes and Personas, right, of the world to do different KYCs if people trip. I think it's a K6 in the US. You gotta, if you go over $10,000 on Steam, you have to be sent one of those. There are different laws surrounding that, and we're not trying to build it ourselves, but we want to take the highest leverage point, which is those MTLs, and make sure we own them.
Cool. Okay, good. And to talk a bit about the sort of UA side of it as well. I mean, the UA side is a really well understood problem in terms of Web 2 gaming, certainly sort of mobile free to play gaming. That was how the whole that's the biggest part of gaming now. That was pretty much built on the back of having this sort of very granular, if anonymized information,
Sure.
which sort of Apple sort of messed up fairly recently. But so how much of that sort of best practice can you sort of take and just go, and now we have this on-chain data, we just filter the two, and it all sort of falls out in the wash, or how easy is it to take Web 2 data, which you sort of as much as I knew, people used to sort of know what devices were doing stuff, but then having a device and a user and a wallet is how you bring those two together. Probably fairly difficult, I would think. I mean, where are you in that process of feeling like you've got a product that is, because as you say, for UA to work well, it needs to be pretty robust and scalable. I mean, that's probably trying to solve for the game developers is scalability. So.
Of course. So when you look at the unique cohorts that come with blockchain-based data, and you look generally at ad networks, you're typically looking. Our one goal is to have a billion players playing games on Stardust, right? The billion player mark. Or the billion user mark is really how these ecosystems have enough quality of data to actually become something more, to become more valuable. Facebook is a perfect example. Their first KPI ever was 1 billion people leveraging Facebook. That's it. And that's really our focus at Stardust and the broader gaming ecosystem in blockchain. You hear it again and again and again. 1 billion players playing blockchain-based games. That's a vision we buy into as well as everybody in the industry. What I'll say about blockchain data is it is incredibly valuable from the perspective of knowing what the expected values of users are and how much money they have to actually spend in game. When you're bidding, or when you're actually trying to acquire users for a Web 2 based game, it's all probabilistic, right? Oh, this person lives in the US in some nice area code, they must be a whale, they should come play my game. But there's no real understanding of who that person is, right? Oh, this person is in India, right? They must want to play my hyper casual game because they don't buy a lot of things in game, but they typically watch ads. It's very hard, I think, to make specific understandings of specific kind of relations on people, and instead you get into these generalities of kind of which region they're in, which country they're in. With blockchain, that kind of lifts the lid a little, right? And really understanding who this person is, and gives us back some of the granularity that, frankly, Apple took away from the ecosystem, which really still to this day is hurting games, hurting huge amounts of games on iOS, and soon Android with Google App Identifier being removed. And so for Stardust, we're early on in that path, right? The data that exists on blockchain is so much more granular, so much better, but 1 billion players is ours and everybody else's goal. And we do believe that the identifier around the internet that people will be tagged with is a wallet address, whether they know it or not, because that is their identity. And whether it's a wallet through a MetaMask or a wallet through a wallet as a service product like ours, we firmly do believe that that wallet address is going to be your unique tag as you go around the internet that defines you, so that game developers and other app developers and even stores you may go to understand more about who you are.
And I mean, this may be, you say you're in sort of early stages yet, so maybe projecting a long time into the future, but it seems to me that sort of Web3 sort of UA is pretty different, or ends up pretty different place from Web 2, because Web 2 stuff was, people didn't know it was happening. It was sort of their data, but they never saw it, and there was like an interstitial layer between the game developer and the ad network, and they were sort of just passed to and fro. Whereas it may not be this way, but you can definitely see there'll be a proportion of people who would be very happy to have their data, to pass the data on if they were getting something in return. So instead of it being a B2B sort of activity, it becomes more of a B2C thing, which then I wonder, does then Stardust sort of leak into becoming, you're sort of a network, and then do you want to almost start offering rewards? Do you want to have tokens you give stuff? Do you want to have I mean, I said that may be a long time down the line, but that sort of, it seems to be how the Web3 ad networks will be different, because they will be consumer facing, and sort of you'll want to give something back, and people will want to get something back from you.
100%. And if you look at it, this has been tried before in the Web3 space. Nothing is new, as I mentioned with the ATMs, right? Maybe the second one is better than the first. So you have like Brave browser, right? Basic attention token. That was an early on a way for people to get compensated for their time and attention on the internet. Unfortunately, for better or worse, I think one of the reasons that Brave and the basic attention token didn't fully capture maybe the value that they thought they would, was because individuals think their data is worth a lot of money. And the unfortunate point is, like, only in aggregates of hundreds and hundreds of millions of rows and data points, right, is data worth something tangible. And it was never, if you're getting compensated 50 cents for your data or 10 cents for your data, like, it doesn't really, for want of a better term, hit the same, right? It doesn't really. Now, what we do believe at Stardust is that value you get by providing more data about yourself to applications on the internet will be passed down in kind. And something like, okay, you connect your Twitter in game. You get extra XP or a free skin to use. You connect your wallet address. Wow, you may level up 5 levels and get no ads for the next 30 days, right? And so these in-kind, benefits you get by providing more of your data, you are compensated for, but in a way that actually matters more to you than pennies on the dollar. And that's really, I think, important, because people don't want to feel, nor should they be, just arbitraged, right? Give me your data, I give you 5 cents, and I get, 6, right? Yeah. But on the other end, we really should be providing players value for telling the games more about themselves, so that the games can give them a better experience within the game and better enjoyment, and the games will compensate them justly for that.
Yeah, that's sort of makes sense. Yeah, and often, as you say, sort of the problem with sort of overt financial value is that can actually be quite different depending on, as you say, someone living in Palo Alto compared to someone in India. I mean, obviously the value of money there is very different. So, but in the game, it's sort of everything's a bit more even. So, sort of sense.
And you see this with play to earn, right?
Yeah,
all the time.
yeah.
Like what crashed Axie at the end of the day was the minimum viable time you could spend in game to earn dipped well beneath the minimum wage of Southeast Asia countries where people were getting paid and playing instead of working because it was a better job. And so these games become a little bit financialized, especially with the concept of earning and getting paid and all of this stuff. And you need some obfuscation layers in between, right, to really give people the fun that they want, rather than turning it into some sort of like crazy financial mechanism.
Yeah, good. Okay, so let's sort of move on a little bit. So obviously you have been in the space for a while, got sort of plenty of clients. You mentioned some of them. I guess Shrapnel probably the highest profile. And sort of looking at the sort of gaming sort of trend for sort of 2024, it's interesting. Everyone talks about 1 billion gamers. I think we're sort of struggling to even know how many, if we've got 1 million or not. I mean, certainly sort of millions of wallets, but wallets are sort of hard to pull back to sort of people. And I guess the biggest game is sort of Pixels with 1 million wallets, although that's sort of dropped down a bit recently. So maybe there was some maybe there were some bots in there. I'm sure there were. So given this sort of billion, sort of notional billion that we sort of talk about, is that? I guess it's a good sort of tagline, but we're not expecting that over the next 5 years, or are we? I don't know. I mean, certainly over the next year, I kind of think it's going to take a year for a lot of these products, even stuff like Shrapnel is not officially coming out until I think next year now. So some of these better products, it's just we sort of get a bit impatient about how quickly they can be made, and so this sort of billion idea is nominal for the long term.
It's hard for our minds to conceptualize exponential growth. We always think linearly, right? We think if there's 1 million this year, how can there be 1 billion next year, right? It can happen. And it really, as I said, games are copy pasta, right? For want of a better term. And, you see all of the same games on mobile, like these MOBAs, they all have the same joystick, like it's all very similar, right? And so I think we can get there. I can't ascribe a time period to it, right? But what I will say is we can get there at any point, because all it takes is somebody to find a better model. And look, I love going back to mobile, because everything we do in gaming, especially in blockchain today with incentivized engagement, questing platforms, play to earn, is just, App Store optimization and incentivized downloads in 2009, right? It's the same thing packaged a different way. And if you look at mobile or Facebook Canvas or any of these games, Mafia Wars, number one, right? Ton of people came. Holy crap, right? Then we were like, okay, lightning can't strike twice. Well, let me tell you it can, because then they came out with Farmville. And that was like, oh my goodness. And by the way, in blockchain, we've seen the same thing. Yeah, Dapper Labs do CryptoKitties and NBA Top Shot. Doesn't matter where they are today. They absolutely killed it with both of them, right? You saw Axie Infinity and then Pixels, both on Ronin. You're seeing the same exact trend that you see today in blockchain that you saw in gaming, right? And so we'll close our eyes tomorrow and wake up. There'll be 4 more Pixels and 1 billion players in blockchain. I can't tell you when, but what I can tell you is that as soon as that formula is figured out, everybody's ready to pour fuel on the fire, right? From your smallest indie developer all the way up to Scopely's and the EAs of the world, right? They're all waiting on the sidelines to see, oh, that works, that's blockchain, I'm doing that.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, I mean, I guess it's maybe, I would say sort of slightly different with blockchain because the sort of, the infrastructure part of it is so fundamental. I mean, do you think those problems have been solved that we can have a game now with like 50 million daily active unique wallets? I mean, because that would be an order of magnitude sort of bigger than what we've got at the moment. And blockchain isn't just let's roll up some new ASW servers. I mean, there is something a bit more to it. There are some more fundamental sort of throughput limits to that.
Of course. Blockchain scaling is getting better. I'll say that, right? You see L2s, you see L3s, and look, if you had said in the CryptoKitties day and age, right, could you imagine a game with 5,000 players because only 1,000 are playing CryptoKitties? I would have said, get the fuck out of here, right?
Yeah.
Like, no way. What I will say is when game developers come to us, we like to have them create games that are the true embodiment of what they think a great game can be with the technology, less constrained on what the technology is today. Because we've seen so many people clip their wings and fit into a box of what the technology allows today, rather than understanding that the technological growth curve, especially in blockchain, is so quick and so fast, and faster now than it's ever been. And so, I do believe blockchain can support 1 billion players. In what topology it will, whether that's thousands of L2s, whether it's, Sui, Aptos, and Solana just together, right? I can't tell you. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. Follow the money. That's pretty much the best way to figure it out. But from that perspective, we will get there. It's not an if, but when. I mean, even today, we're sitting here recording a podcast on a product that in the early days of the internet was not possible until only about the bandwidth requirements of probably 2006 or 7, right? When the cloud really came to be, which was probably 25 years after the internet started, did we have the concept of being able to create a product like this, which uses the cloud behind the scenes and the bandwidth to actually record this great podcast. And so, what blockchain will be in 25 years, I have no idea. But what I can assure you is it will be running the world, and it will have more than 1 billion people on blockchain technology.
Okay, that's good. It's positive. I would actually say, I think it was only when I started doing the podcast 5 years ago, and then I think I wasn't using it right at the time, but there was Zencaster, which was an audio version of this, and so I think the video stuff only really came in possibly even 2 years ago. So that's
crazy, and that came through new web technologies, probably HTML5, WebGL, all these abilities we don't have today.
And I don't know how much you can say about this sort of stuff, but when you see, you've been running this company for 6 years, you're talking to game devs, potential clients all the time. Are you seeing any changes in sort of the companies coming? I guess it seems like to me there's not any slowdown. Even in last year, there's still quite a lot of new stuff being announced. It just seems to be a pretty steady let's try this new tech.
Of course. 100%. Look, I think, again, it's all cyclical. What you have from last cycle, 2021, you have a lot of great game developers who raised a ton of money, and the games are all coming this year and next. And it's super duper exciting. You saw Nyan Heroes, released recently. They're incredible game developers. Midnight Society, Shrapnel started 2-3 years ago. Web2 developers, Azra and Finigods, right? These people are all coming into Web3, and you see what you now have seen, and actually, for want of a better term, the game developer layoffs that we see in the space now, have actually brought many of these great game developers into new ventures into Web3. And so what we are seeing now more than ever is Web2, very good Web2 developers entering the Web3 space. And we're seeing the crop that did so during last bull market, built through the bear, start to come to market today and next year as well. And so that's been one of the biggest changes on, in 2019, 2020, people who are building games for the first time, raising these mega rounds to try and build games, to now like truly spectacular game developers who created some of the largest Web2 franchises coming into Web3. And it really just makes me bullish on the future because, as you say, great games are what this is all about. And this is what these people are building as they come into the space today and tomorrow.
Good. Well, on that note, I think we'll leave it. You've been very positive. I've tried to knock you off your $1 billion mission, but you've stuck firmly to it. So that's good to see. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me here.
And thanks to you for watching, listening to the podcast, whoever you are consuming it. Every week we're putting out new episodes covering what's going on in this world, where we're going to a billion players. Over some time frame, we'll debate that off air. But
I love it.
I hope you're enjoying the show. Don't forget to subscribe and come back next week. See you then. Bye bye.